to be free. Drop the ties that bind. Gravity holds, orbit won't decay. Can't escape the fray. Breaking down on the breakaway, always the last to go. The takeaways, it's over. All right, it is 8 p.m. on the dot, and we are going to get started. Welcome to 9 Home Studio Mistakes. Turn that music off. And how to avoid them for forever. I'm super glad you're here. I'm excited. I've got Goosebumps Alert handy for when and if we need it. Really glad that you're here. Thanks for being here. I really do appreciate it. I see a bunch of familiar faces in the chat. If you would, let me know that you can see and hear me by telling me where you're from, where you're tuning in from right now. I already saw we have folks from Belgium. It's 3 a.m. there. You are a wonderful person. We've got Pavlo from Ukraine. Somebody's in New Zealand. I don't even know how that's possible, but I do. If you don't have your coffee yet, grab it soon because we're going to hang out and have some fun. Minnesota, Canada, Mexico, and even Oklahoma. Love it. Very cool. I saw a bunch of familiar faces here. I saw Trucky's here. Trucky, it's been a long time. Good to see you. I think I saw Tony John in here. I saw just more people than I can list off. But welcome. And here's what today is going to look like. So we're going to go through the 9 home studio mistakes. These are killer mistakes, but we're going to talk about how to avoid them and why they're mistakes and how to get them out of your life so your music can do what it needs to do. I'm going to share with you some new stuff at the end. And then at the very end, after that, we'll do Q&A. So if you have questions, you can ask them in the chat as we go. I'll probably miss it at some point, but save them for the end and I'll stick around. We'll hang out. We'll have fun. We'll answer questions. It'll be delightful. I would encourage you to take notes. I find that when I'm typing it up or writing it on a piece of paper, it engages my brain a little more and I'm able to internalize it more and get more out of it. So I highly recommend that. And if you're watching on a computer, close your other tabs and things and let's just be present, you and me, for a little while. And several of our friends across the world. If you are in the Ukraine or Belgium and it is 3 a.m. there, then if you fall asleep on me, I understand. But first things first, who am I? Well, my name is Joe Gilder. If we haven't met, you probably discovered me through one of these places. Home Studio Corner is my own business YouTube channel, blog. I started it back in 2009, believe it or not, and we are still going strong 14 years later. Still making music. Just released some new music in the fall of last year, so I can't get enough of it. And look, it's me in a picture with myself. That's delightful. Also make content for Recording Revolution, Personas, Sweetwater, Fender. I was laughing earlier as I was getting ready for tonight. Just did a video shoot with Fender at one of their studios in California, and when I got the email about what to expect, they were saying be here 8 a.m. for hair and makeup. Anyway, I thought that was funny because there is no hair and there was only a tiny bit of makeup. Anyway, no makeup for tonight. I'm sorry, but so here's what's gonna happen. We're gonna so that's me. You know me. You're here because you know me on some level. I've been a musician since I was a kid. I released my first album in high school, and it was terrible. And I probably committed all of the mistakes that we're going to talk about tonight. So I've been in your shoes. I've been where you are. It is possible to overcome these challenges. So I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces in the chat. Thank you for being here. I did make the video quality go down a smidge so that I could see your chats quicker. That was the trade-off for tonight. So that's what we're doing. All right, let's dive into mistake number 1, see if we can make some sense of all this. So mistake number 1 is focusing too much on the gear. You knew this was coming. One of the very first pieces of content I ever made for Home Studio Corner was talking about GAS, right, which is Gear Acquisition Syndrome. It's funny because I wrote that as I was working at Sweetwater as a salesperson selling gear. So it put me in a bit of a pickle because I needed to sell stuff to make a commission to pay things like, rent. But at the same time, I also recognize that we tend to want to just buy stuff in lieu of sometimes, or maybe instead of actually doing the work that matters. We've all heard the stories, right? There are people that have done amazing sounding work on embarrassingly cheap equipment, right? There's stories of, Tom Morello with his plastic guitar that I think they used on Killing in the Name that won a Grammy, and it's a plastic guitar he got at a pawn shop in Canada, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but there's a thousand of those stories, right? There's the James Taylor album that was recorded at a beach house using one of those old VS 2480 hard disk recorders with just simple microphones like an SM57, I believe. And there's stories of Bono sings with a 57, and he could use any microphone he wants. That's what he chooses. So, point being, obviously, equipment matters. We want to have good equipment. I'm surrounded by equipment right now. There's so many lights and buttons around me. 3-year-old Joe would be freaking out. So I love gear. I'm not anti-gear. It's that the phrase here where it says too much. Focusing too much on the gear can be a problem. It's the same with anything. So I get into, I have a pretty curious personality. That's putting it mildly. I like to get into new things. So the latest thing for me is kind of in the realm of software. And anyway, I will dive deep into these things, and I am just as easily prone to getting caught up in the gear thing as well, right? I'm learning a piece of software, but really all I want to do is figure out what's the next mechanical keyboard I should get, right? Or, oh dear, no, don't get there. Or it's those types of things, right? Like I'm going to do a new workout program, but I really want to get that specific piece of workout equipment before I can do it right. That's just excuse after excuse. But a good craftsman knows how to use whatever tools are available. So that's the point that I'm making here. Yes, you need equipment. If you want to buy equipment, go for it. Buying stuff is fun. I've got guitars all over this room. I love them. But just don't focus so much on the gear that you skip over that whole, skill thing, right? Like people who wanted to ask, I don't know if this was a real thing, but one of those famous authors, I can't remember which one, but the equivalent of someone asking him what typewriter they use to write their books, as if the typewriter is what made Ernest Hemingway. It's ridiculous when we think about it from that standpoint, but we all fall for it. I can't tell you how many times I mentioned this on a video recently. I'll do a video and people will. You could probably go look at my last 100 videos. And I bet in almost every one of them, you'll find a comment where someone says, hey, what microphone is that? And it's a fine question. I'm not mad about the question, but the microphone changes pretty regularly, which is interesting to me. But they always are like, oh, that microphone sounds so good. Oh, that microphone. Oh, man, your voice sounds so. It's mostly, this is going to sound arrogant, but I'm trying to make a point. It's mostly that my voice sounds like this. My dad had this booming bass voice. I got more the baritone side of it. It's just the way that like my body works, right? The lungs come through here and it makes sounds that sound kind of like this. So you could put really any microphone in front of this and I'm going to sound like this, like it or not. So there are things, obviously, put a $6,000 mic here, it's probably going to sound different. But am I going to sound inherently different because of that? No. Probably not. Decidedly not. So I know everybody who's watching this right now is nodding their head saying, I would never fall for it. We all fall for it. So just be aware of it. Mark it, in the corner of your mind every time you open up that Sweetwater catalog. It's delightful. It's wonderful. Go buy stuff from Sweetwater. But maybe a good rule of thumb, and this is advice I gave to a buddy who could not stop buying guitars. Maybe if you haven't made music with that last thing that you bought, maybe do that first. And maybe your reward is you can now buy a new thing. I think that's it's great for two reasons. One, it keeps you from just buying stuff and never making music. But two, you end up with these albums where, oh, that's the one where I traded a microphone for that Telecaster, and I played it all over that album. And that's the one when I first got the 335, and I used it all the time. Or that's the one where I had gotten the new J45 acoustic guitar, and I played like those things. It becomes like memories for each album has its own, like, oh, this gear is associated with that album. I remember I used that. The Line 6 DL4 delay pedal is all over one specific album. So it's fun to kind of it's almost like a yearbook or almost like a time capsule even. But anyway, I think I've done my share of talking about this. This next one, though, it seems weird to put on this list, but I am on a crusade to rid the planet of this next thing I'm going to talk about, and it is recording acoustic guitar direct. Now, acoustic guitar is my first love. I've played that instrument more than any other instrument, possibly second place to my voice. But I love acoustic guitar. I love recording acoustic guitar, and I detest, I don't use strong language like that, but I detest the sound of a pickup plugged into something recorded acoustic guitar. Man Network in the chat says, DI acoustic offends God. It's a strong statement, but I'm kind of inclined to agree. So what do I mean direct? So if your acoustic guitar most likely has a 1/4 inch out that we see here in the picture. Some of the fancier ones have an XLR out, which is like a balanced low Z. Anyway, who cares? And guitar pickups have come a long way. Somebody said DI stands for Devil's Instrument. Stuart. Oh, that's good. We've come a long way. There are pickups that a friend of mine, I went to a show he was playing at Ryman Auditorium, and his guitar sounded amazing. And he had like an LR bag system that has like the built-in microphone and the blend with those are wonderful, and they're great, and you have to have them for playing out live. So every Sunday at my church, I plug in my J45 and we play it live. I don't put a mic on it because feedback and all that would be a huge issue. So I'm not saying that DI is bad and you shouldn't use it, but in the studio, DI is bad and you shouldn't use it. Just, if you don't believe me, just go listen. Just use your ears for a second. The sound of a DI is the sound of about this much wooden plastic, because it's mounted usually under what is called the saddle, right here where the strings come over, and it's just hearing that, and that's it. Or maybe it's fancier and has a few different, like the Taylor expression system, I feel like had some stuff on the top, and I hated that one more than most. It's just, they serve a purpose, and there are pedals that are trying to emulate the sound of an acoustic guitar with a microphone, and the technology is great and wonderful, but nothing compares to putting a microphone in front of a beautiful instrument like an acoustic guitar. Now, electric guitar, of course. We don't mic electric guitars. We plug them in and we mic the amps, or we plug them into amp modeling software. That's a whole different thing. But plugged in acoustics, think about it. A guitar is a complex instrument. Not unlike a piano. There's lots of wood, there's lots of things happening. There's the core frequencies that you play, and then there's the harmonics that are coming off of the instrument itself. Guess what? You get almost none of that when you record direct. You just get the sound of the vibration of the strings hitting the saddle, and that's about it. Now, it can still sound okay, again, for live use, but in the studio, a microphone beats DI 1,000 times out of 1,000. Now, the one caveat I will give is I've heard some people that will record with microphones and the direct, specifically if they're doing finger-style stuff, and I've heard an example of that actually sounded pretty great. So I will say there are options where it sounds great, but I have yet to hear an option that sounds great with just the DI guitar. And I will be the first to admit it if it comes along and it exists. But I promise you, if those of you who have been on live streams with me where we're listening and critiquing things, it's almost a curse at this point. I can pick out direct acoustic like that because I hate it so much. It's metallic, it's plasticky, it just doesn't get the job done. So I'm not going to belabor the point much more. I just wanted to really be forceful here, because next time you're in the studio and you go to plug that thing in, I want you to just feel this wave of shame. I'm kidding. Don't feel shame. Just maybe you'll see me on your shoulder saying, I don't want you to record that direct. Just trust me. Now, is it easy to record acoustic with a microphone? No. It's difficult, which is why sometimes it's easier just to plug the DI in. But I just can't think of a good reason not to. And there's lots of stuff in the chat, and I think you mostly agree with me. But anyway, I've said what I've said. I've said what I've said. Let's move on to number 3, shall we? Number 3, paying no attention to the room. So whether we like it or not, recording and mixing has to take place somewhere, right? It has to take place in a room. So unless you are in space, which sound doesn't travel in space, so you're kind of hosed there, or you're outdoors, which is interesting. I've thought about setting up the studio outdoors and just seeing what's it like to mix with no walls at all. But typically we're in rooms, and typically we're not in rooms that were designed by professional acousticians who make it sound as close to perfect as possible between the design of the room, the shape of the room, the materials used, and then usually some sort of processing on the speakers themselves to make sure that they are producing a flat signal. The problem is a lot of people just pay no attention to the room. And that's a shame, because while I don't think it's the be-all, end-all, if your room already has some pretty terrible sounds to it, you're not going to be able to remove that later. There's technology and software that can remove something. Just how about this? How about we make our recording area, especially from a recording standpoint, make our recording area sound as good as we can. And it doesn't mean you got to go spend $4,000 on really cool custom treatment. Doesn't mean you even have to have a dedicated room for your studio. I know a lot of people are splitting their bedroom with their significant other, and this little corner is where they record, and they pull their gear out and they record, then they kind of shove it in the corner. That's legit. I totally get that. But you can always do things like hang up a couple of blankets around you as you record, right? Like ironing board, big thick moving blanket here, same thing over here, maybe a mattress, so that at least it's just dead and you can record something where the microphone is hearing predominantly the instrument you're recording and not the room itself. Having things like rugs and carpets makes a big difference. Having acoustic treatment, if you can see, you probably can't see it, but I've shown it before. I've got these panels I've had for years. They're just wood frames with insulation and a bed sheet over them, essentially. Anything is better than nothing. So if you're in a room with hard floors, drywall on the walls, and it's kind of a box shape, you just get stuff in there, even just anything in there. Have the kids throw their beanbag in there, put something on the walls, put a rug down. Those things will help, because what happens is you're recording, let's say vocals, because just about everybody does vocals. You're recording a vocal, and if you sing with any volume whatsoever, that volume is hitting the microphone, but it's also going out into the room. And then it goes and has a heyday in the room and bounces around and then comes back in and gets picked up by the microphone. So the voice is the predominant thing that you hear, but then it picks up the rest of the room. It just does. And you probably don't notice it, because this is where it makes my head kind of spin for a second. Like, let's say I'm in a room that doesn't sound great, and I sing into my microphone, and I can't tell that there's a lot of room in there because I'm singing as I'm doing it. So I take my headphones off, I listen back to the recording through my speakers, because that's good practice. And I don't hear the room there either. Why? Who can come up with a reason? Why would I not be able to hear the room in the recording as I'm listening on speakers? That doesn't seem to make much sense. Well, the reason, and we'll see if any right answers come in, is because that sound is also going into the room. So the room is a double-edged sword. It hurts you on the recording end, and it also hurts you on the mixing end. So if I record this in a blank room that has lots of noise, then the noise gets picked up. And then if I listen on the speakers, I'm also hearing I can't get away from the room. It almost makes me feel like claustrophobic. Like I can't escape this room, because it's just there. It's imparting itself on everything you do in the studio. So unless you're doing completely in-the-box productions where it's just all virtual instruments, no vocal, no nothing, and you're on headphones, that's about the only situation where the room gets out of the equation. Otherwise, you've got the room on top of the room on top of the room. So what's the takeaway? Deaden the room as much as you can. Don't make it into like a sound booth. You don't have to do that, but just enough to where even as you're hearing my voice now, if you're listening on headphones, like, this is a pretty big room. It's about 20 by 22, but it's carpeted floors. I've got treatment in all the places that matter, and it's got the slope ceiling that kind of bounces the sound away differently too, and it works well. Now, is there still some room in my recording? Yes. But the other part of what I was talking about before is, first of all, you're just getting some room in the recording, and you may not notice it at first, but then fast forward a month, you go to mix that song, and let's say you go put some compression on that vocal, which of course is a good practice, a good thing to do. Suddenly, the room just comes to life. Why? Because compression brings up the quiet things as it's turning down the loud things. So you end up with big room sound on your voice. Now, is there an occasion where that works? Sure. Probably not in your case, right? If there's like a wonderful album that's like this indie rock thing and it needs to sound like a voice in a room, for that one project and that one song, it might be cool. But the rest of the time, you're thinking, how do I get this room out of this microphone? You just can't. Take the room out of the equation at the source, and then you won't have those problems. That doesn't mean go nuts. It just means you need to pay attention to it. So when you pay no attention to the room, ironically, the people who pay the least attention to their room probably have the worst sounding rooms, which is sad, but probably true. But this leads me to number 4, which is paying too much attention to the room. So remember, we're talking about we're talking about 9 recording mistakes. Probably not the top 9, but probably. But mistake number 4 is paying too much attention to the room. So on the flip side of that coin, as with most things in life, we can take things too far either way. If we go nuts paying attention to the room and trying to do everything we can to this picture here, if you're not familiar, that's an anechoic chamber. It's a room that literally does not echo at all. Maybe that's our goal. We try to sound, I get this question a lot. How do I soundproof my studio? You don't, probably. If anything, the only way to soundproof a room is to build it from scratch and put soundproofing in all the places that matter behind the walls. Also, if you don't know, you may think your goal is to have a soundproof room. It's actually not. Apparently, if you go into an anechoic chamber, you will go crazy. But people apparently can't stay in there very long. That the absence of any reflections tend to drive people insane. So don't go insane. Don't make your room like I've seen people that put like foam on every inch of their room. That's not necessary. You don't have to do that. The room can have some of a sound to it. It just needs to be dead to a point where the room isn't the predominant thing that we're hearing in the sound. So if you were to put on headphones, listen to my voice right now, you're probably hearing a little bit of the room. If I get closer to the mic and speak a little more softly, you're hearing less of the room. That's one key. If you just go play and sing softly and get close to the microphone, you might get the proximity effect problems, but you'll get less of the room there. Same if you're listening on speakers, the less volume you pump into the room, the less the room's going to interact with it to a degree. So that's one of the reasons why people talk about listening at lower volumes, to help you hear what's happening without too much interaction from the room. Either way, find that happy spot in the middle where you're not paying no attention to your room, and everyone who hears your recording says, wow, that sounds like it was recorded in a bathroom. But you're also not paying so much attention to the room that A, it's back to the first problem. You're so focused on that, you're not actually making any music. Or B, you've made it so dead that it actually sounds weird. Because if the room is too dead, that can also make the recordings sound weird. Sometimes those higher frequencies that bounce around, like right behind you, right behind this microphone or this camera, is a wooden kind of pegboard kind of thing. So my voice bounces off of that, and it's kind of nice. It's a little pleasant. So it feels like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but sadly, this is the case. We got to make sure we find that happy medium in between. All right, let's move on to number 5, shall we? Number 5 is using plugins too soon. So specifically, we're talking about mixing now. This, if you haven't gone through my 5-step mix guide, this is kind of the core problem that step 2 solves in that 5-step process, which is the static mix. So plugins are fun. Look at the plugins on this picture. I want to just go grab them and mess with them, right? And these are just stock plugins in Studio One. If you have a whole plugin collection, bless you. I don't know how you do it. I can't handle having that many choices. But if you have so many things in your collection and you're just excited to go use that $30, $40, $50 plugin that you just bought. It's understandable. The problem is if you start using the plugins too soon, you're fixing problems that maybe aren't actually plugin problems. So, for example, I use this example a lot because it happens a lot. Earlier today, I was on a live stream with some of my members, which we'll talk about that later. And there was a song where the guitars were really loud. So it was drums, bass, vocals, electric guitars. And the electric guitars were, if this is where all the instruments are here, the guitars were like up here. Volume-wise, they were just significantly louder than everything else. But they were also really, really bright and harsh. So they kind of had two strikes against them. But the problem, I started off by saying, we really need to EQ these guitars. They need to be a little bit warmer, not to be so harsh. It's hurting my ears. But the more I listen, the more I realize, you know what? No, we've got to bring the balance of the instruments themselves is just off. The drums and bass are the quietest thing, which just is backwards, right? Because they're pretty loud instruments. The guitar is the loudest thing. The vocals kind of buried. We need to kind of scratch everything, remove all the plugins, and spend as much time as we need just getting those balances right. I say this all the time. It's an overused phrase, but back in the day, when like the Beatles were making records in Abbey Road and things like that, the engineers were called balance engineers. Their job was to balance things. Now, of course, there's different types of balance, and we're not going to get into that today. But getting just the basic levels right, it seems so elementary. I sometimes feel embarrassed when I talk about this because it sounds so simple that, if you were in a room, I could see your eyes just kind of glazing over because you think, this is just super simple. It is. And sometimes the basics are the things that you skip over because you think you know better. And you end up, if the guitar is too loud and you don't recognize that early on, guess what? You're going to spend the rest of your mix trying to EQ and compress that guitar into submission when all you really needed to do was bring it down. That's the idea. I've had so many occasions where the bass guitar in a mix is just killing me. And I try this EQ, that EQ, this compressor, that compressor, maybe some multiband. I don't know what's going to make this bass do what it needs to do, only to realize, you know what? I think it just needs to be turned down. And then everything falls into place. It's so simple that it almost goes back around the other way and makes it complicated. Because in its simplicity, there's a lot of beauty there. I feel like I'm getting philosophical now, but don't grab your plugins too soon. Get your levels, get your balances good. You'll have plenty of time for your plugins, I promise. But let's first get those balances right. Number 6 mistake is trying to solve a recording problem with a mixing solution. So this is a little bit of a continuation of the last one, but everyone here can say, what's my dumb acronym? What's my mantra? What's the thing that I should probably get tattooed somewhere? I've said the forehead, probably not there, but if a matching I got this tattoo one here that says this. What is it that I say all the time ad nauseum, and I've said it since the beginning. The first episode of the Simply Recording podcast that I did with Graham Cochran, which released back in like 2011 or 2012, was called Get It Right at the Source, and they're all coming in right now. What is the dumb acronym? It's GEARATS. Get it right at the source. So, what's the opposite of get it right at the source? What's the other phrase that people say? If get it right at the source is on this end of the spectrum or the continuum, which one goes over here? Can you guess that? Because the problem is, I'll just go ahead and give it to you. It's fix it in the mix. So you either get it right at the source or you fix it in the mix. Guess what? Only one of those really works. There's only so much you can do in the mix. There they are. All the fix it in the mix are coming. I've got you all like, well trained. Good job, everybody. FITM. That's it. So, and you can all say it, and we can all like nod our heads and agree. But it's kind of like that whole plug-in problem. It's easy to fall back into that trap of just letting the recording problems be and just hoping to fix them later. And it's frustrating because you just can't do it. I have this thing. This is weird, and I probably shouldn't say it in public, but there's a time when I don't do a lot of client work mixing as much as I used to, but whenever I would get tracks from a client and would pull them in and just kind of hit play just to get a feel for, like I hadn't heard the song yet, just get a feel for what it sounds like. Within the first couple of seconds, if I could tell that these tracks sound terrible, I instantly got in a good mood. Like it would cheer me up that these sound terrible because I knew, I'm not going to be able to fix these. So I'm just going to do my thing. I'm going to get a good balance. I'm going to do as best I can with EQ, compression, things like that. But the end result is still going to sound pretty crappy because the the whole garbage in, garbage out thing. It already sounds bad, which means the client isn't going to be able to tell whether I've mixed it amazingly or not because they couldn't tell that their raw tracks sound bad. Now, I know that sounds harsh, and I'm not saying like I'm trying to like rip people off. It's just more understanding that the source is everything. I'm not going to spend the next 8 hours trying to fix your crappy guitar because at best, I'm going to make it just sound slightly less crappy. You know what I mean? On the other hand, if I get tracks from people and the tracks already sound amazing, that's when I get a little nervous because I don't want to mess it up, right? I want to retain all the goodness and then do what I can in the mix to, enhance it and do all the wonderful things that we do in mixing. But those situations make me a lot more. It takes me probably longer to mix great tracks in the sense that I'm really trying to be careful and handle. I still mix pretty quickly regardless, but it's a weird kind of dichotomy there. Somebody in the chat said something I wanted to, Anthony says, get it right, the source, but God bless Melodyne. And that's true. And I will say to the Melodyne thing, which if you're not familiar, Melodyne is similar to auto-tune. It's a way of tuning vocals. For several years, like since starting Home Studio Corner in 2009, I went through several years and several album projects, albums and EPs where I did not tune my vocals. And it was kind of this same reasoning because get it right, the source, I should be able to sing on key. So don't tune them. And if you fall into that camp, if you have that conviction, God bless you. For me, I finally came to terms with, I use EQ on my guitar. Why not use tuning on my vocal? I'm taking what was recorded and doing what needs to be done to get it to sound like it needs to sound. Now, I want to be able to, like, I'm not going to write and record a song I can't even sing, that I have to just do heavy Melodyne just to get it to be passable. Like, that's not the goal. But as far as one more tool in my arsenal to help me produce a great recording, wonderful. So for me, in that situation, get it right, the source means a great vocal performance. If it's pitchy in places, I'd rather have that. I could always tune it just a little bit versus a really sterile vocal performance that's technically on pitch, right? Like, never gonna give you up. Like, that's no good, right? I hit the notes, but who's gonna want to listen to that? So, there you go. All right, number 7. We're honing in on the final 3 of our 9 mistakes in 9 home studio mistakes. I can't remember the name of this thing. And this is death by DIY. So there's our good friend. I totally lost his name. This always happens to me. From Mary Poppins. I keep wanting to say Don Knotts. It's not Don Knotts. It's what's his face. But he's the one-man band, right? He's got cymbals on his knees. He's got strings attached to the kick drum. He's playing an accordion and it's got a horn on his Bert. That's not. Yes, it is Bert. What's his real name though? Dick Van Dyke. Thank you. Goodness gracious, that's embarrassing. Anyway, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? This is. With great technology comes the ability for all of us to sit hunched over our computers and put together an entire album without ever interacting with another human. So we can record the guitar, we can program the drums, we can play the bass on a keyboard, we can sing the vocal and then melodyne it. We have the technology, right? We have, some of the stuff that I'm hearing that like will play acoustic guitar, like it's acoustic guitar, virtual instrument, but it sounds really, really good and really, really real. That's wonderful. I think those things are awesome because they allow people who maybe don't have a good guitar or can't play guitar or don't have fingers to be able to have guitar on their project without having to hire someone or go out and collaborate with somebody else. But the downside is just because you can program drums, for example, doesn't mean that you should. I've told the story before, but there was a customer of mine. He was a VIP member who emailed me saying, hey, I need you to teach me how to program drums in like Easy Drummer. And I said, how about this? Instead of doing what you're asking me to do, why don't you get with my buddy Tim, who plays drums on all my stuff, and send him your song. He'll record it in his studio. It'll be a real drummer playing real drums in a real room. A really good drummer, by the way. And you'll spend about what you would spend buying Easy Drummer anyway. Now, obviously, you only have to buy Easy Drummer once, but he did it. He actually, I tell this to a lot of people, but most people just say, I'm an easy drummer it anyway. But he did. He went through with it, and it changed his life. Like, he started hiring Tim to play on every song, and then he would hire like a saxophone player out of the UK and like I don't know, like an accordion player from Belgium. It was fascinating how he once he tasted it, he realized, wow, not only do I not have to learn how to do this thing, to which if I learn how to program drums, at best I'm going to be okay at it. I'm getting better results overall, and it forces you to say, okay, if I'm going to shell out some cash to have somebody play on this song, I got to take a step back and make sure this song is good. Is it worth that? Because if not, let me go write a better song so that it's worth spending the money to send it to him, and then that's going to have an internal motivator for me to finish the song, right? I'm not going to pay him $150, $200 and then just sit on it, right? I'm going to be much more likely to finish that song because there's money involved versus the song where I just slap some drums together and I'll get to it when I get to it, right? All right, let's move on to number 8. Number 8 is perfectionism. It is a terrible plague on, I'm not going to say all of us, because I'm assuming there's some people who don't struggle with this. But I feel like as a musician, like, we know that there is a standard we're trying to shoot for, whether it's from a performance standpoint or a mix standpoint. Like, ultimately someone says, hey, this sounds perfect, right? It almost goes in slow motion because that's like what we're longing for. But really, we don't want perfect. I had somebody send me a song years ago, emailed. I get these unsolicited emails from people. They just send me an MP3. And sometimes they're pretty demanding. They're like, hey, listen to this. Give me feedback. And I'm like, delete? You at least say please. But this was years ago, and I happened to listen to this person's song, and they wanted feedback. And so I listened, and it was this instrumental thing. It was like piano with like a flute. It was a pretty simple song. It was instrumental. And I wrote back. I don't remember the exchange exactly, but I said something along the lines of, sounds good. It was something like, yeah, there's not a lot of melody happening in this middle section, or that thing was kind of harsh sounding. Or I just gave him a little bit of feedback, just quick feedback on something. And he writes back and says, no. This is a perfect piece of music. It is, the way he said it was like, it is technically perfect. So there is no criticism for it. And I think I just said, well, congratulations, and let it go. But this person was claiming that their music was technically perfection. First of all, why are you asking me for feedback if you know that it's perfect? But secondly, it was boring. It was a boring piece of music, which is what I said to them in much kinder terms, like, oh, this could have more of a melodic piece to it or something. But it struck me that, like, there's probably a lot of people that maybe think that that's possible. But the takeaway here, of course, is you could try to achieve perfection, but even if you got to a place where you were delusioned enough to say this is perfect, there's a really good chance that thing sounds terrible, right? Because the thing we love about music, go listen to your favorite album. Are you going to find perfection, or are you going to find like a beautiful imperfection to it? Now, you could make an argument that maybe some really on the grid electronic music is like completely lined up and everything, and that's great. But even that, we were talking the other day with my buddy Gregor from Personas, that even within electronic music, where everything can be perfectly on the grid, there's a lot of emphasis for a lot of people on, if the kick and the snare are right on the grid, let's make those hi-hats have some looseness to them, so it feels a little more organic, feels a little more real, has a little more of a groove to it. So we're literally like injecting imperfection into this perfect thing, right? When digital came along, you'd imagine, like, it's almost funny, like, engineers are like, oh, these tape machines are so noisy, these consoles are so noisy, my kingdom for a system that's quiet. Well, here comes digital, says, all right, I'm here, let's go. And now they're all saying, oh, it's too clean, it's too quiet, it's too perfect, it's too pristine, give me back all the imperfections from the console and the tape machine. It's hilarious, but it's kind of true. Like, we grew up on these sounds, and so the cleanness of digital was really jarring for a lot of people for a long time. So anyway, aiming for excellence, I'm all for that. Perfection, not so much. Like, just look at like what I do with Home Studio Corner, like videos that I make. Are any of them perfect? No. Are they perfect for someone in a given moment when they're trying to solve a certain problem? Yeah. I could take a video that I spend a few hours on and I could spend a whole day on it. Would it be more perfecter? Probably. Could I like add more things to it and polish? I don't even know what I would do, but if I just said, well, I'm spending 8 hours on this, let's go. Could I make it better? Maybe. Perfect? I don't know. But would it be worth the time invested? No. And would it even be better than what I would do normally? I don't know. Like, I guess we'll never know. But investing a lot of time into something has proven over and over again to not be the key to it being great. Case in point, I forgot the name of the album again, but Guns N' Roses did that album that started in the 90s and didn't finish till late, like into the 2000s. I want to say it was 12 or 13 years from when they tracked the first drums, bass, whatever, to when they released it. And I can't even remember the name of it because it was so forgettable. I haven't listened to it. Now, maybe it's great, but just generally speaking, as far as like Guns N' Roses is concerned, you got like Welcome to the Jungle and then the 12-year album over here. Nobody remembers it. Chinese Democracy. Now, maybe it's an amazing album and maybe I'm completely wrong here. But would it have been an amazing album? Okay, so Man Network says it was gross. Okay, so maybe it wasn't great. So anyway, it's like, surely, if I spend 12 years on an album, it's going to be the best thing ever. No, probably not. I have other things to say about this. We're going to leave it at that because I think we all get it, but I think we can fall into that trap of, oh, let me just clean it up a little bit more. No, do something that scares you and put it out there before you think it's ready. See what happens. You will freak out and it will be wonderful. All right, number 9, the final piece of the puzzle here is making music in a vacuum. And I found a picture of someone alone on a pier. It makes me very sad. This goes along with what we talked about, death by DIY. So death by DIY, I'm specifically talking to doing things that you can do, but you're not very good at them. Making music in a vacuum is even if you can play all the parts. Let's say you're a Dave Grohl and you're the best musician at all the instruments in the band. You could technically play all of them. Even so, doing it all by yourself without any community, any interaction, any feedback, you're not going to produce your best work. Even more so than that, considering that probably 99% of us are only good at a handful of things, the overall project is going to be improved tenfold if you incorporate people into that process who are really good at those different things. So my example of the guy from Australia hiring my buddy Tim. Better result, like no question, because he got a great drummer to play on it versus a mediocre put together thing. Now this doesn't mean it's perfectionism. It just means let's get the right or the perfect person for the part. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, but it's going to be great. Now, that doesn't mean, like, for example, I've said this before. I've had people tell me, Joe, you're not a great singer. You should have someone else sing on your songs. Well, I'm not going to do that. Are there better singers than me? Absolutely. But am I going to sing my own songs because it's good for my heart to do that and it's something I get joy out of? Absolutely. So you got to measure these things against each other. If you get a lot of joy out of playing the drums with Easy Drummer and clicking things around with the mouse and it excites you and fulfills you creatively, absolutely go for it. But if you dread it and then you don't like the results at the end of it, that's probably a good time to have somebody else do it. Or maybe you fall into the camp of people who say, well, I don't have enough space to record drums. I don't know a drummer, so I'm only going to do little guitar vocals for the rest of my life. That's a sad state of affairs too, because you could totally have someone else record drums. There are people inside my VIP membership, which we're going to talk about in a second, who play drums on each other's projects. Multiple drummers who have played on so many different projects. And they don't even live on the same continent. That word sounded weird. They don't live in the same country, even, but it's possible because we live in a digital connected age and it's delightful and it's wonderful. So making music in a vacuum, it's just, this phrase has been kind of my mantra for the last year or so. And the phrase is simply better together. For me, musically, I released an EP with my band, me and Joel and Tim, and we wrote the songs, produced the songs, we did everything together. And I would say it's just insanely better than anything I could have done on my own. Even if I had written them on my own and then brought them into play, it wouldn't have been the same. This was like a truly collaborative thing, which is delightful. Okay, so those are the 9 mistakes. I hope that you took some notes. I hope that you felt guilty of committing at least one of them, and you will never commit that again. I'm kidding. We all make mistakes. But hopefully you can avoid these and fast track your way to making better recordings. But before you go, I'd love to spend some more time with you. I want to share with you a little bit about my VIP membership in case you're not familiar with what that is, and talk about how it could potentially help you and your music. If that's okay, let me know in the chat. Say yes, or sure, or cheerio, like our friend Bert did. By the way, Michael Geyser, I see you in the chat. Scott Parker, I see you. Who else do I recognize? Adam Rogers is here. Oh my goodness. You're in Australia. That's bonkers. Steven Sikora said, keep talking. Okay. Keep talking, monkey. Okay, here we go. All right, so here's where we're going to go from here. Let's talk about something for a second. So there are a couple of things that are true. The first is you want to make great sounding music, right? We all want to make great sounding music. Here's a question. Why? Why do you want to make great sounding music? I asked this. I had an event last month, a room full of people, and I asked them, why do you want to make music? And the answers were really cool and inspiring. So here's an example of a few of them. Somebody said, I just want to get the music out of my head. It's in there. I got to get it out. Some people say they were born to make music. I would put myself in that category. Some people want to leave a legacy, right? You have kids, grandkids, or you just want to leave something behind, as somewhat morbid as that sounds, for others to enjoy. Maybe you just want to express yourself, and music is a great way to do that. Maybe you want to achieve, you've had a dream since you were a kid of being an artist, and maybe that doesn't mean you get signed by Sony tomorrow, but it does mean you release an album, or you release your own music, or you build a body of work, right? Some of the answers in the chat, I'm seeing James says he wants to bring joy to others. Man says, I don't think I want to make music, but that's what I do. All right, great. Somebody else said stories untold, right? Like I love people who write story songs. I'm not good at it, but I love that idea. It's one of the best ways to, anyway, let's keep going. But here's my reason for why I make music. And I came up with this a few years ago, and it just continues to ring true for me. I make music so that I can hear myself singing the truth back to myself on days when I don't believe it. Now, that's a very self-focused thing, but for me, I go through phases where I'm struggling with something, or I'm doubting things, or I'm distracted, or I don't know I feel like a ship without a rudder. And a lot of times, as narcissistic as this sounds, listening to one of my songs, or even just remembering it and singing it to myself, reminds me of what I know to be true. And it's a powerful thing. And it's like I'm the only person I listen to, so there we go. But one of the ways that we cope is through music. Quick story on that. There's a guy at my church, and he came up to me randomly. So I did a songwriter night at my church. Just a handful of songwriters get together. Let's play some of our songs, real low key. And I played a song there. And then he comes up to me, this is probably 3 months later, and said, I've been having a really terrible week. And I don't even know what that means. Like, he didn't give me specifics, but he said, it's been an awful season for me. And he said, I just listened to that song that you played. I went and found it on Apple Music, and I listened to it probably for 3 hours straight on repeat. And it really was encouraging to me. And the chorus of that song doesn't even rhyme. The chorus literally goes, don't you know it's okay to be broken? I wrote that for myself. I wrote that for a friend. And apparently, not knowing this, I wrote that for this guy, who I wouldn't even meet for another 5 years. But it meant something to him. Now, obviously, we're not in it for the kudos, and I don't tell you that story to like brag on myself. Just as a very practical example that just happened a couple of weeks ago. Those things don't happen very often, but when they do, it is like just soothing to my soul to know that even if just a handful of people, one person, gets some encouragement from something I did or wrote or made, that's worth it. Our music gives words to people who have none. So what does that have to do with what we're talking about tonight? This took quite a turn. I'm talking about perfectionism and death to DI guitars, and I'm talking about why we make music. Well, like I said before, a couple of things are true. You want to make great sounding music, it's hard to make great sounding music. These two things tend to be really true, right? Sometimes it feels like almost like Hunger Games. The odds are never in my favor. You know where you want to go. Maybe you can even hear it in your head, but you just can't seem to get there. You tried, you just can't get there. So why is that? What's the problem? If you do that for long enough, you start to think of things like, maybe it's me, maybe I'm not cut out for this. But the real problem, and this is kind of the first time I'm verbalizing this in this way, and when I first started thinking about it, it really made a lot of sense to me. The real problem here is overly complicated technology that you need a degree to be able to use. Now, I do a lot of work with technology companies. I love technology. But for a lot of people, if I could name one thing that is like the villain in this story, it would be that the technology just gets in the way. Both the technology itself and just the physics of how sound works. It's just a lot. And you need to spend a lot of time doing it, at least in theory, to understand it, to get good at it. And you're busy. I'm busy. We're all busy. I'm sure you probably believe you could figure it out if you had enough time to do it, but time is obviously a precious resource. When you do have time to make music, you would rather like actually have fun than just spend that music time being frustrated, right? This was supposed to be fun, and now it's just frustrating. It's certainly not intuitive. So what do we do? What do we do? Well, some people buy a boat. Some people just say, forget this. I'm just going to listen to music. I'll play guitar occasionally, but I'm not going to do this recording thing anymore. And they sell their gear and they buy a boat, or they get into golf, or they do any number of things. Obviously, I don't want you to do that because of all the why reasons before. You've got music in you that needs to come out, and a boat's not going to help you do that. So there is an alternative, and my wife has a solution. So here's what I mean. I love business. I'm an entrepreneur, home studio corner, recording revolution, stuff with Fender, Personas. Like, I love it all. And I find it fascinating. And I read lots of business books, hundreds of business books over the years. I filled up notebooks and text documents with all sorts of ideas and dreams and plans. And what happens is I take all these ideas and my brain sometimes can't differentiate them. So I just mash them all into like one mega idea. And so I'll come to my wife, who is my partner in the business, and I'll say, hey, I got an idea. And I've been brewing on this for a few weeks, maybe a few months. Here's what I want to do. And I'll start to lay out this insanely complicated thing, like that doesn't make any sense, that a customer would not be able to understand. But in my head, it's the perfect way of combining every single technique that I've ever learned about business from all the books that I've read into one thing. And then she will just gently ask me a couple of questions. And then with a little like gentle prodding, she'll say, that's insane. Or she'll help me understand that's dumb and insane. And there's really just a handful of things that we need to focus on in our business. Let's let go of the rest. So that's a similar metaphor for what we do in the studio. Knowledge isn't the problem. It's not that you just don't know enough. Not really. There are thousands of things you could know, but there's only a handful of things you need to know to make great sounding music. What? There's a lot that you can ignore and still make great music you were born to make. Once you learn the handful of things you need to learn, making music becomes a superpower. Now, I know that sounds like such a marketing thing. I almost didn't put this slide in, but I experienced this. Superpower. Give it whatever word you want, but like I've personally released dozens and dozens of songs of my own. I've mixed and produced hundreds of songs, not my own. And it is an incredible feeling to know that after this webinar tonight, I could go down, refill my coffee cup, come back up here and make a great sounding piece of music. Like to know that I could sit down whenever I want and make some killer music, that feels like a superpower. It really does. And that's what I want for you as well, right? So you may be asking, okay, how do I know which things to focus on? Well, a couple options for you. I got 3 for you. Option A is just trial and error. You can figure this out, just invest enough time, spend a lot of time on it, and you'll probably get there, maybe, hopefully. Option B is you can go get a degree. That's a legitimate option. You can just learn all the things and then figure out how to filter it down to the ones that actually matter and make sense. Or you can learn from someone who's already figured it out for you. i.e., this guy, right? This guy right there. I've been doing this for so long, I've learned to hone down and forget all the stuff we don't need and just hone in on the things that matter, the things that make sense. And it frustrates a lot of people when they think I oversimplify sometimes, but I say, hey, the people I help are actually making great sounding music. Turns out they didn't need to know how a mid-side processor does what it does. They can just make great music, right? So ideally, you and I could like do one-on-one training, but that's just not feasible, right? So the next best thing is my VIP membership. So I'm going to talk about that really quickly, and then if you've got questions, I would love to hang out with you. I only drank half of my cup of coffee, so I'm getting jittery. Would love to hang out and answer your questions afterwards. So real quick, let me go through what's involved with VIP. And if you've seen VIP before, or if you're an existing VIP member, some of this might be a little bit different. So stick around. So what's included? VIP, first thing is, and this is new, is masterclasses. We're moving to a model where we're doing a monthly masterclass. So these are going to be deep dives into topics that you want to learn about to help you on your next project. So for example, the most recent one is 6 production formulas to help you get unstuck. So when you sit down to produce something, I'm excited to produce this and I have no idea what I should record next. Gave you a bunch of like formulas to use to help you figure that out. So that's just one example of the masterclasses that we'll be doing every month inside VIP. Next are challenges. We're going back to monthly challenges inside VIP. So this is every month there's a new challenge, and we're going to probably coordinate that with the masterclass with specific guidelines and specific things to do. So it could be a mixing challenge, could be here's a song, go produce. Here's a guitar vocal, go produce something around this. Or here is a drum part, go create a cool loop with this. We've done hundreds of them over the years. But now every month we're going to be doing a challenge. And the challenges are the backbone of VIP. Because I've heard this time and time again. When people get in and start actually doing these challenges, that's when things start to click together. They may have all that head knowledge, the knowledge I talked about before, and there's a certain amount of knowledge, obviously we need, but the big kicker is just getting in there and doing stuff. And I design these challenges to help you get to the doing of the stuff and ignore all that other stuff that doesn't really matter all that much. At the end of every month, we do a live stream where we listen to your submissions. So this is your chance to be in the spotlight and be heard. There's also a community aspect. So there's a forum chat room type thing inside VIP. This is new as well, or it's updated, where you get to meet other people. You can search and find people to collaborate with. You can post your stuff for feedback, and it's instantly accessible. Here's a little example of what that looks like. The Viper pathway, I'll briefly explain. This is kind of a new thing in VIP that shows you kind of where you are in your journey and what your next steps should be. And there are challenges for each of those. So in addition to the monthly challenges, we've got these Viper pathway challenges that will say, okay, so you haven't released a song yet. Here's what you need to do next. Or you haven't done a challenge yet. Go do these things next. If you're the kind of person who needs someone to say, hey, listen, hey, you, go do this. That's what this is for. There's obviously, I'm not going to be like calling you up and saying, have you done it yet? But it's here waiting for you when you're ready, a very specific like way to move forward. Also, there's an iPhone app and Android app. So you can access the entire thing from your pocket, which is just bonkers to me. Stuart, there you are in the thing. So all of these, if I were to strip these out and sell each of these individual things, like literally sell each masterclass every month as a standalone thing, that sounds exhausting. But if I were to do that, this is how those prices would come out for a year. That adds up to a little under $1,300 worth of stuff. Okay, so that's the VIP Silver membership. I'll talk about pricing in a second because there's a second level. If you want to kick things up a notch, it's called the Gold membership. And Gold membership includes everything in Silver, but also Mixed Critiques Live. So this is a live stream just like this that we do twice a month now, where you submit mixes and I listen to and do in-depth critiques of your song. So critiquing the production, the mix, the songwriting, really anything is fair game. We just had one earlier today. It was delightful. Vinny, your song was probably my favorite from the day. Joe Reed, yours was probably my favorite too. But we gave feedback, and it's amazing to hear people of all different people who have been doing this forever, people who are just getting started, and there's always something to learn. Learn how to listen critically, but also how to get actual feedback on the stuff that you're working on. Normally I charge $175 for critiques if you want me to do that privately. So this is a way to get those significant discount. There's a members only Q&A podcast. This is like a hotline. Send in your questions and I answer those on that, and you can download it to your podcast app. And then there's a bunch of bonus courses that you get as soon as you sign up. There's a 21-minute mix sprint. This is just bonkers. I show you how to mix a song in 21 minutes, and it just blows all your preconceptions about how long mixing should take out of the water. It's very cool. 7-day recording challenge. Give me an hour a day for a week, and I'll have you releasing a song. So you could literally be releasing a song 8 days from now, 7 days from now. Music Theory 101. This is just for folks who want to get a deeper working knowledge of kind of how music works, music theory in general, and then we dive into specifically the Nashville number system, which is just super fun, and it's difficult to explain, but it's really fascinating. Online Collaboration Blueprint. This is a nuts and bolts of how to effectively collaborate with someone over the internet. Vipers are doing that all the time. Oh, and Stuart says, don't forget the Goosebumps alert. By the way, if you ever we're doing a live stream and your music makes me have goosebumps, I hold this up because this matters, because this means I had a physical reaction to your music, which means it connected with me on a multiple levels to get me to have goosebumps. I almost have goosebumps talking about it. Finally, this one's brand new for Gold members. This is Mixing and Mastering Fighter EP. So this is an EP that I recorded a couple of years ago. It's a fantastic EP. It's my most popular if you go by downloads and streams, including the song Fighter, which is my most popular song. But this is a course I created where I go through the whole mixing and mastering process of this specific album. It's just super fun. So all of those, if we sold them individually, so this is all the silver stuff, and then this is all the stuff included with gold if I were to sell them all individually. And that total value comes out to a little under $3,600. So the obvious question is how much? Real quickly, how much do you think a college degree in audio is? I've looked it up. This is older information, but the last time I looked, it was like 80 grand on the top end for an audio degree. So go for it if you want to, but I got a slightly cheaper solution. So we said, here's the value of silver and gold, kind of if I were to break everything out. Obviously, you're not going to pay that. That'd be ridiculous. For silver, the value coming in at around $1,200. Cost is only $190 per year. And if you're already a member, you're good to go. Other option is $19 a month. So you save actually 2 months if you pay annually. Otherwise, it's just $19 a month. It's just bonkers. I'm so excited about that. And then the gold membership, this is how much it's worth. It's only $490 a year. Or just $49 a month. That gets you access to the master classes, all this stuff here, and then all this stuff here if you're a gold member as well. Plus, I'm always releasing bonus courses too, which is delightful. And also, final thing, just for this week, so the VIP membership is closed after this next week. So 7 days from now, it's shutting down for a while. We're going to just get busy making music, and then it'll open up one day in the future. But also, if you buy the gold annual, if you're thinking gold might be something fun to try out, if you get the annual one, I'll let you get one of my flagship courses for free. So these are the big three: home studio recording, home studio mixing, home studio mastering. These are like the trilogy of my courses. And you can they each sell for $300. You can get one of those for free if you sign up. So all of that together, just a killer value. I'm really excited about it. So before I give you the link, you can, unless you found it already, a couple of questions. I'd love to get your answers in the chat, just to hear from you. How much have you spent? How much money have you spent on your studio? Just ballpark it. Thinking about the computer itself, which could be thousands. Thinking about guitars, that one gets me because there's a couple thousand worth of guitars. Furniture, interface, software, microphones, stands, cables. Cables kills me because you think, oh, I just need a couple cables, and there's $200 gone. John says probably $3,000 to $4,000. For me, just guitars alone, I think is probably $3,000 to $4,000. If you're talking about the last 20 years of getting guitars, Steven says probably around $20K. Scott says 15. Ernest says 2,100. 35 to 5K, 30K, 20K, 20K. Like, especially if you've been doing this for a long time, like it adds up, right? 5K, 8K. I think A Laird wins with 50,000 plus. Oh man, like I've got this guy in Nashville who he designs studios and they're super expensive. Like 15 years ago, they were like 40 grand. I think they're like well over 100 now, just to design your room and put in speakers and stuff. But anyway, I'm seeing 60K. Captain Moto wins 40K, 10K, lots of 10Ks roughly. Just bonkers. So Ryan said, I can't say with my wife watching. That's fair. But she already knows. Anyway, so next question. You've spent that money. Now, are you getting the results that you want? You don't have to answer this in the chat if you don't want to. I get it's kind of a personal question, but it's a good question. Like, okay, I've invested in this. Am I making the things I thought I would be making with this? And if the answer is yes, awesome. Like, I don't assume the answer is always going to be no. Man Network says yes. But I'm seeing some no's come through as well. And if you're not, I don't want to say this to be like shame on you. Just to bring it to mind, like, oh, right, I got into this. I got really excited about audio, but then it took a turn. I never quite got there. Have you released lots of great sounding music would be another way of asking that. And if the answer is no, what's it worth to you to be able to do that? Right? Like literally, could you put a dollar amount on it? It's probably priceless, right? Especially you start talking about like helping others and like having like a mission and like leaving a legacy. Like it's just really cool, big stuff. And here's the hard question. What if you never actually make the music you were born to make? This one's hard, right? Like what's at stake if you don't do this thing? Like obviously people don't die if you don't make your music, right? Governments don't crumble because we didn't release our album, but still, like we were born with this music in our hearts, and if we don't get it out there, like what's at stake? You don't have to answer that. It's just something to think about. So I talked about two things being true earlier. Here are two more things that are true, especially after the questions I just asked. One, you can do this. Like for real, like a little bit of a goosebumps alert. You can do this. It is not some mystery that only the gurus on the top of the mountain with long beards can do. You can do this. Because the second thing that's true is I've seen it over and over again. I'm literally looking at people in this room who I can in my head hear their progression of the first thing they ever submitted. Like Scott Parker, for example, is one of the people on this chat. He's been a VIP member for years. I remember his first projects. He was trying to figure things out, and now he is cranking out music, and it's just awesome to see. I love it so much. So I've seen it over and over again. You are not going to be the case that turns out you can't make music. I promise you can. So let's turn it all around. Come join our community. Come be a Viper is what I call my VIP members. It's a bunch of musicians just like you all over the planet, by the way. Speaking of, actually, let me give you a couple of testimonials from Viper, several of which are on the call. Michael, I think, is here, said, since I joined, it's opened up opportunities to collaborate and track with anyone in the world. No more feeling like I'm just stuck in my own little world. Steve in the UK said the challenges will improve every aspect of home recording, and a global community to collaborate with that's given me genuine new friends. Becoming a VIP member is the best musical move I ever made. These are members I just said, hey, give me your experience with VIP. Ben Holmes is like a VIP of VIPs. He says, my music has never been better, and I've made new friends from every continent on Earth. I don't think we have any members in Antarctica, Ben, so easy. Hershey Bell from the US says, it wasn't until I became a Viper that I was able to unleash my full potential as a musician. The transformation has been so dramatic that I can barely listen to my music pre-VIP. The monthly challenges and the amazing community of collaborators are like nothing else you'll find anywhere on the internet. Joining VIP was the best decision of my musical career. Thank you, Dr. Bell. Scott Parker, I just mentioned Scott, says VIP has been invaluable to me as a fun and practical way to put into practice what Joe already teaches so well, resulting in the ability to finally get my music out of the hard drive and into the world. I love that, which has been a long-time goal of mine. Al Collins in the UK, long-time Viper, says, the difference it's made in my life and music is incalculable. I've been a member for a long time, and yet I continue to learn something new, inspiring, or just musically interesting each time I log in. Made a lot of great friends, too. And Al is a great harmonica player, by the way. John Wymore, pastor in, I believe, Texas, says, being a Viper has helped me release more music and better music and given me the opportunity to collaborate with others from all over the globe. Martin, similar story. He's making more and better music and collaborating. Ben Berman, final one, says, education and community worth way more than the asking price. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Ben owns everything I've ever released. So if anyone could have a chip on their shoulder, it would be Ben. But that's it. That's the details. Would love for you to come be a Viper. It comes, I don't have a slide for this, but I guarantee everything I sell. So if you come in and you try it out and you say, this is just not for me, you have a whole year to come back and say, Joe, it wasn't for me, I need a refund. And I'll say, sure. Actually, I'll say, hey, Pam, go deal with that. It's fine. It really is. Because I want it to be valuable for you. And I know it will be, but I put that guarantee out there to just make sure you know the risk is on me, not you. You're taking a big leap of faith in trusting me with something. And yes, I want to answer questions for sure. So get your questions ready. Go ahead and put them in the chat. But yeah, you're taking a leap of faith and trusting me with something. I'm a guy on the internet, right? That's weird. But I would really love for you to be a part of it. And by the way, just to the link is homestudiocorner.com/VIP. I'm going to see if I can put that link in the chat. I don't know if it'll let me. Nope, I have to put the HTTP thing on it. Try that. Okay, it's not clickable. You can go there. So real quickly, the VIP, you go to that link, it'll just have 4 options for you. There's the annual and the monthly for both the silver and the gold. Pick one that's right for you. They're both wonderful. You get access to the challenges and everything with either. The gold is a fairly newer one, but there's a lot of fun stuff happening there. If you want just more hand-holding and more, not hand-holding, but if you want more interaction and just kind of more stuff, more value, that's there for you as well. And if you're a silver member and you're like, you know what, I really want the gold, go for it. It's set up, it'll cancel your silver and switch you to gold. You can do that now. And if you buy the gold annual, you'll get an email. It'll say, hey, which free course do you want? Recording, mixing, or mastering, and then we'll send that to you, and you can dive right in. A lot of folks on the chat have been through those as well. Brato says the number one benefit of a community behind paywall is there's no trolls. I will say this is 100% not my doing, but the community inside VIP, I don't know how it happened, but like it is the nicest online community I've ever seen in my life. You can go on Facebook for 10 seconds and find somebody in a fight with someone. I don't think I've ever seen a fight inside VIP. It's just, anyway. It's for whatever reason, it's true, and it's wonderful. And a lot of those members are actually here today because they're just delightful and love to hang out, which is great. Lucas says, so if you have questions, I'm going to hang out with you. I've got a little bit of coffee and some water left. I'd love to hang out as much as you want. But go to that link, homestudiocorner.com/VIP. Pam, if you're watching, if you can put that as a comment on the video. Actually, no, you can't because it's a live stream. Never mind. Y'all can figure it out. homestudiocorner.com/VIP will get you all the information there, or you can ask a question here if you're not sure about something. Let's see. Lucas says, what if I want to do the gold VIP and also get the trilogy bundle? Great question. So I do a bundle with all 3 of the courses, which is the trilogy for, I think it's $7.99. Go ahead and Lucas, I'll let you know. I'll send you a thing for the difference. We'll figure it out. So yeah, go do the gold annuals. That gets you into all that stuff. And then we'll do a separate thing for that, if that makes sense. Because yes, once you start bundling things, it gets swanky. But I can create a bundle just for you, Lucas. Vince March, J45 or Hummingbird? I'm a J45 for life guy. I don't dislike the Hummingbird. I don't love the way the Hummingbird looks. I know that's probably sacrilege. I don't like the pick guard thing. And the red, it doesn't have kind of a red sunburst to it. I don't love that. Steven, thanks so much for being here. So yeah, I'm J45 all the way. I was a Taylor guy for a long time. I still have the 314. It's a great guitar. But when I picked up the J45 and played it, I said, oh, this is the sound I've been looking for. And I've owned at least one Martin that I liked as well. I had to sell that actually to pay the bills a long time ago. Let's see. Too many colons on your link. Dang it, Mike. I'm so glad you are here. Mike keeps me on top of things, and I appreciate that. Hey, that time it worked. Okay, I put the link in there. Now it's working. Thank you. This URL needs a colonoscopy. Oh, we're just a bunch of middle school boys. Let's talk about Reaper says, why do studios with the best gear, best engineers, and the best performers still use so many samples instead of using what they recorded? That's a good question. Man Network says it's they're producing music that is paint by numbers. And that might be a piece of it. So I know that things like Trigger exist, which lets you take, like, here's a kick drum and let's layer another sample on top of it. I think most of them are layering them, not replacing entirely. I think that's probably, so you're getting most of the real sound, but it's just supplemented with something that sounds a little bit better. Honestly, it's so, like, I liken it to, I bought a Helix guitar amp modeler. And it just, like, there's one part of me that says I should be able to get those sounds with a mic and an amp. Yeah, but I don't have a Marshall. And actually, last time I recorded a Marshall, we had a heck of a time getting the sound that we wanted. It sounded amazing in the room. Just for whatever reason that day, the mic placements and the mics we were trying just wasn't working super well. So, but with a Helix, you're hearing exactly how it sounds coming right out of the thing. And I have 50 amps at my disposal, which is too many. I really just need like 3. But I think of it that way when it comes to this. Like, we recorded this drum kit, we did it as best we could, but we really wanted it to sound like this drum kit, so we're gonna add in some samples to kind of balance it out. I don't know. That's maybe what I would think. But yeah, hang out. What other questions? I would love to answer your deepest, not darkest question, just your deepest question. I want to help you. Dan Holder says, I have all the courses. They helped me graduate from only using Pro Studios to being able to record my own and improve my... Love that, Dan. That's cool. Sorry. Give my apologies to the Pro Studio who you are no longer paying. Go track drums there occasionally just to keep them happy. That's the one thing, by the way. Yes, Pro Studios are totally different now than they used to be, but one of the things you just can't get in a home studio almost ever is a nice big drum room. So there's still place for, let's go book a studio just to record the drums because that room sounds amazing. Anyway, Vince says, am I being an idiot? I love questions that start that way. Am I being an idiot? Yes. No, I'm kidding. Am I being an idiot for being a traditionalist when it comes to brands in regards to external equipment purchases? What do you mean? Are you talking about like your brand loyal? Like you only buy, like, obviously I've got like way too much Personas equipment, because I've done so much work with them, and I'm a shill, not really, but kind of. What do you mean? Explain that a little bit. I'm not sure what you're asking, but my gut is that you're not an idiot. George says, in Silver and or Gold VIP, are there any classical music recording engineers and techniques discussed? E.g. orchestra, operas, choir, wind ensembles, and live concerts. There's not a ton of that. It's predominantly kind of singer-songwriter, rock, folk. But over the years, we've had folks that do a lot of orchestral stuff. Bob comes to mind. He's actually no longer a member, but I do, in my recording course, I'd record a cello for a song. And I talk about, like, a lot of the concepts that we talk about really apply across huge, like today in the Mixed Critiques Live for Gold members this afternoon that I had, it was vastly different songs, but we all still learn from each other because the concepts are pretty similar. Concepts of dynamic and balance and lows, mids, highs, like all of those things still come together. But specifically to your question, George, no, we don't have a lot yet that I know of, but maybe you can be the first to kind of really kick that off because doing orchestral stuff, we have folks who do orchestral arrangements in the box, and it's delightful, but we'd love to have you be a part of that and show us the ropes. Kevin, if you're still here, thanks for hanging out. Lots of guitars and strings. What's your go-to for studio recording acoustics? For me, my go-to, if I'm like, this is like, we're making an acoustic record, I'm going to get my 2 Earthworks SR25s, which are at my church on the piano. I have to steal them back. And I'm going to do it in XY, and I'm probably going to have it right at the sound hole, about 8 to 12 inches away, even though that sounds weird, but they're not actually pointing at the sound hole. They're on either side. And I'm going to adjust the distance to get the right amount of low end, and then that's going to be my setup for the day. I did that literally on my EP, Rain. If you go listen to that on Spotify, just look up my name, Joe Gilder, no U, Gilder. You'll go listen to Rain. All those guitars are recorded that exact way. That's the J45 with those mics in that position for all the guitars. So that's my go-to. I haven't been able to beat it yet. So that's what I'm doing. Hip Critical TV says signed up. Thank you. That's awesome. I hope you love it. Go check out the, you'll get an email, but go check out the Start Here section of the Viper Pathway. That'll get you rolling. How do you deal, this is from Jorge, says, how do you deal with your taste of music getting in your way of giving objective feedback from mixes or music people share? That's a great question. In some ways, I don't, right? Because in some ways, I'm going to have a personal preference of what I want to hear. But it's a pretty informed preference from doing this for a really long time. So I may not, for example, if you sent me like you're like a friend of Gregor's in Germany and you send me this like heavy electronic piece, I still know what a good balanced mix sounds like. So I can still say, hey, the low end is too loud on this, or the high end is too harsh. Like some of these simple concepts, they apply across everything, right? Like an acoustic song isn't going to have as much low end as a hip hop song, right? But there's a too much level. And when you get to a certain point of having listened for so long, you get to a point where the stuff that's not right stands out. And that's kind of what I do. Now, from a creative and like production standpoint, I still give my feedback because I think I tend to have a good track record of having some good ideas for that. But I also leave it up to the person to say, hey, this is, I'm giving you my quote unquote professional opinion, but also like use your own creativity in this. Here are things that I think are kind of deal breakers. And here's a couple of cool things I think you should try. All based on my own experience. So I try not to like just pontificate on theoreticals as much as, hey, here's what I think should happen because I did it on this thing over here and I really liked the result that I got. That kind of thing. Good question though. During static mix and a track takes a solo that's not loud enough for just a segment of the tune, do you slice the track and boost that section a few dB in the static mix or leave that for volume automation? Good question. Typically, I will. I'll either slice it and boost it or use like the clip gain thing in Studio One, just because it's annoying to have to say I'm going to go back and do that later. So for me, that's part of the balancing act. Not going nuts and like chopping everything up crazy, but like, yeah, a whole section of the solo is just too quiet. Yeah, I'll go ahead and boost that. Typically, also for like vocals, I typically don't even worry about the lead vocal that much during the static mix because I know it's going to change dramatically once I slam a compressor on there later. Then I'm not going to really bother with it too much until then. Sonic Retrograde says, if you become a Viper now, will you get access to the content from previous VIP periods as well? Yes, you do. So there's so we changed systems a few years ago. So everything before that, a lot of that's not there. But since 2020, yeah, you've got 2.5, 3 years worth of Viper content that you can go sift through. Tony John just signed up for VIP Silver. Tony, I can see your face from Iowa. We met in person a month ago, 2 days ago. I'm super glad to see you there, Tony. That's going to be great. Greg tape video, unplugged from the speaker, plugged directly in. I'm not sure what you're talking about. The stream is so inspiring. Pavlo, I'm so glad, man. And I know you're in Ukraine. I hope things are looking up there. I don't know what to say about that, but thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I keep scrolling and then the chat like scrolls down again. So I'm trying to like go back and find the questions that I missed. If I missed your question and you don't think I'm going to get to it, you can certainly put it in the chat again. Patty says, I don't have much soundproof options. What's your opinion of those acoustic boxes that surround the microphone for vocal recording? Theoretically, I don't imagine they do much, but I haven't used them. Like I think honestly, a couple of blankets on a couple of mic stands or just something that can hold them up here-ish around the microphone will do the job probably better. Because those things, they block just this much. And so the thing I like about having, like, if I'm in a situation where I really want to like a tight, quiet vocal, I'll slide these gobos I have. I'll maybe go back over here and have like a V-shaped thing with the gobos and the microphone kind of in the point of that V, and then I come in and sing into it. And so I've almost created a booth where like my voice goes in, the microphone hears it, but then the gobos absorb a lot of that vocal. So there's not much vocal getting out into the room and coming back past my head into the microphone. I mean, that's theoretically what those boxes do, but these gobos are like 7 feet tall, so like they're really blocking that sound from going any direction, right? Something that just surrounds the microphone like this, there's still a lot of space for the sound to escape, if that makes sense. I don't know. But also, Patty, as far as how much they cost, it may be worth experimenting. I should probably get one, but I don't think if you took one of those and put it in like a bathroom with tile floors that it's going to be like the magical sound, right? And I'm not saying that's what you're asking, but them's are my thoughts. Glenn says, wondering if there's a mic specific for like a saxophone or trumpet, or should I just buy a mic you use for acoustic guitar? I hope that makes sense. No, it makes perfect sense. So interesting. So brass instruments in general, they're pretty fascinating because I heard somebody say once that like saxophones are very similar to the human voice. So, because the kind of the raspiness of it. So in that sense, you could just use a typical vocal mic on a saxophone, and I've done that. For trumpet, I typically just throw a dynamic on there. Kind of a good rule of thumb is like if it's a loud thing like a guitar amp, I'll usually my go-to first thing is to grab a dynamic and throw it at it. That sentence was hard to say. So like a trumpet is just really loud. So I'll just put a dynamic on it, and it tends to work well. You can certainly try both A/B. Plenty of people have used condensers on, or even ribbon mics on brass sections. They can all work well. They're just such loud instruments. You just kind of have to slap something in front of them and capture them. That's really kind of all there is to it. I know that sounds like I'm being dismissive, but like it's just when they're really loud, like a guitar amp, you just kind of slap something on there and see what happens. But no, it's a good question. At some point, it'd be cool to see a shootout between string gauges, picks, and maybe parlor guitars versus your favorite acoustics for chimey. That's a cool idea. I do have a parlor-ish. That Fender over there is kind of parlor-ish. Definitely picks would be really easy because strings is hard because you have to change the strings, and it's hard to you just can't do it quickly, so I feel like there'd be a difference between. But yeah, and picks make a huge difference, right? Sometimes changing the pick is like life-changing for the guitar tone itself. World Time Now says, any experience or words of advice on producing, mixing lo-fi, down-tempo kinds of stuff? I mean, so I don't listen to it a ton, but like I get in these moods where I want to listen to some lo-fi beats. I think in that world, if we're talking like get it right at the source, in that world, the source is the samples that you have, right? The virtual instruments that you're using, all those things. And I'm all for that. Like I'm all for, I need some different tones, so I'm going to get a couple different guitars or some different guitar pedals that will inspire me to create new things. When I talk about gear acquisition syndrome and too much gear and stuff like that, I'm typically talking about like mixing plugins and that type of thing. But with making a lot of like in the box music, right, that's done with virtual instruments, I think having a good amount of samples and good samples and lots to choose from is a big piece of that puzzle. So I would say making sure you've got a lot of good samples that inspire you, that give you a lot of variety. And I feel like, honestly, probably more than any other genre, I feel like people who make electronic music can teach the rest of us how to produce things well, because you're experts at getting good sources and good tones and dynamics and building and things like that. So, I mean, honestly, just make stuff that moves you, and then, figure out how to fix problems in between. Mike Obaugh, if you're still here, glad to see you. Good evening to you. All right, I lost my place. Vince is saying, like, try to back to Vince was saying, am I an idiot for sticking with certain brands, like sticking to name brands when purchasing or time-tested brands versus a newer brand. No, I get that. Like I own a couple Gibson guitars, right? Are there better guitar makers? Probably. But those are just, I just fell in love with those specific guitars. And there is like an element of like kind of the history of it that's pretty fascinating, right? Like, oh, this is the same guitar that so-and-so played 50 years ago. Like, that's fascinating. I got to tour the factory at Fender, where all the American-made stuff is made, and it's pretty inspiring. Like, to just, so, like, I want to own a Fender. I own a couple of them, but, like, it makes me kind of want to own more Fender stuff. So, no, I don't think it's dumb, but at the same time, I think there's something to be said for not backing yourself so far into a corner that you're not even open to other options, but there's a reason that the popular brands became popular, right? Like there's a reason a cliche is a cliche, because there's some value there, at least at some point, right? Let's see. George says, oh, he's just saying something nice about my videos. Well, thank you. Do you primarily mix with speakers, headphones, or both? Primarily speakers. Hey, Brad. But I watched a really interesting video. It was a conversation between Andrew Sheps and Fab DuPont. I think it's a recent video I'm guessing it was on the Pure Mix YouTube channel, where Andrew Sheps mixes on Sony MDR 7506s, $100 headphones, and he has for a really long time, and he has some really compelling reasons for doing it. Namely, it takes the room out of the equation, at least for the mixing side, and I think that's fascinating. So, but you absolutely can get great mixes on either, for sure. I get tired of having them on my head, on my ears, like pushing on. I have fairly big ears. I just get tired of having them pushing on there, or if I'm wearing glasses and headphones are uncomfortable. But also I just enjoy speakers, and I don't crank my speakers. It's usually pretty chill volume. Lanson says, I'm going to go create before my day is over. That is a good reason to shut down the live stream. Go make some music. Peter says, if you're giving feedback on a genre you're not into, there are still technical things that are universal. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like I've commented, like at this point, having done this for so many years, I have critiqued and talked to, and commented on every style of music you can think of. But yeah, they're universal principles of balance that apply no matter what, which is fun, right? So like I can speak with some authority on your recording of Tibetan throat singers, maybe, maybe not. Let's see. Is there a way to pitch correct with the slice and boost technique? Is there a way to pitch correct? Are you talking about when you slice it and change the volume for the rough mix to pitch correct? Yeah, like Melodyne at least, you can just apply it to a certain little chunk of audio, if that's what you're asking. Marco says, I'm the reason he uses Studio One. That's awesome. Making music for about 30 years now. It's about time to share songs with the world. No release yet. Bunch of songs are ready to record, mix, master. Your classes are going to make this happen. Love that, Robin. I'm excited for you. I love the excitement. Like, yeah, it's awesome. Jorge says, do you have any thoughts on, man, I can't, this thing every time I try to click it messes up. Do you have any thoughts on Dolby Atmos and the hype around it? Yes. So I didn't understand it for a while because I'm kind of a head in the sand, just work with, use what I use. And since Studio One doesn't do Atmos, at least not yet, it's even less on my radar. But I have sat in really nice Atmos rooms, and it is really, really cool. And I did, when I sat in those Atmos rooms, I went out and bought a pair of the AirPod Pros that have sort of Atmos on them. And it was fun and kind of interesting. But I lost interest in it too, because it's like, you can only do so much with headphones, right? It sounds a little different, but it's not multiple speakers in a room. What's interesting about Atmos is that it's not a 5.1 system, in that you have to have all 5 speakers plus the sub. Adam Rogers, thanks for hanging out, buddy. You don't have to have all of those necessarily. Sorry, if you're listening to a 5.1 mix, right, which is 5 speakers and a sub. If you don't have all of those speakers, then you just don't get that audio, right? So if you mix something and you panned the guitars to the surrounds, and I don't hook up my surrounds, I don't get guitars, right? With Atmos, the way I understand it is the system, it takes all those different pieces of audio and puts them where they need to go depending on what the system is. So if you only set up one speaker, it's going to fold everything down to that speaker or that pair or trio of speakers. So even if I had panned something to the back speaker, but you don't have the back speaker set up, it knows that because it knows what's in the system and it kind of rearranges it accordingly. That piece of it is interesting. And the fact that record labels are throwing lots of money to have everything remixed in Atmos is intriguing. Peter says it's borderline scamish. That might be. Because in order to receive perfect Dolby Atmos, the speakers have to be positioned perfectly. Yeah. But I think the flexibility of it is interesting, at least. But I'm also a person, like I'm an audio guy, but I still just use the built-in speaker on my television, right? I don't even have like a sound bar. Like I've just never wanted to bother with it. When we bought this house, it actually had a surround sound system built in, but they were all just ceiling speakers. And I was super excited to actually say, well, it's already hooked up, I'll use it. Played a couple of songs through it, sounded terrible. I unhooked them and sold the power amp. So I was like, this is not worth it to me. Pat Dupes, thanks for hanging out. Lucas, oh, hang on. Sorry, you're just answering somebody else. Man Network says, most of the label work I do is demanding Atmos and spatial audio just to be eligible for Apple and Spotify playlists. If it wasn't for the labels, I wouldn't care about it at all. Yeah, that seems to be the case. The labels, it's interesting how like technology drives the music industry. Like if Apple hadn't put Atmos in all their stuff, I don't think the labels would care. Maybe not. Maybe if Spotify had, but now that's a great point. He's saying like they need it to be Atmos so that it's on this all Atmos playlist, and so everything's getting remixed there. That's cool. I mean, and also like people are making making good money doing this, which is cool. But the other side is people who are like demanding that like, yeah, Studio One needs Atmos. Like I get that, but the average person has 2 speakers, right? The average person doesn't have 75 speakers set up to do a full Atmos mixing rig, right? Jeff says, I'm not sure about the time commitment. Would going monthly with silver membership be the way to go to just try it out? I'm really intrigued by this, and I think I'm ready for it. Yeah, that's great. That's probably the least oh, Pam is commenting as me in the comments. That really freaked me out. Yeah, that's a great way to get into it. Yeah, I'd say do that. I mean, you save a little bit of money with the annual, but if you just want to give it a shot, that's great too. I say go for it. I think you'll fall in love with it. And if you don't, that's great too. Either way. All right, so John McKinley had a question. Let's go find you, John. John. Goodness gracious. Hey, John, if you're listening to me and you want to just type your question again. I'm not seeing it. Anyway, Lucas says, have you tried VSX from Slate yet? No, I don't use third-party plugins. It's not really like a stance. I just don't. I've got the FabFilter Pro L2, and that's it. I just like using what I have, and like I'd rather buy guitars than plugins, if that makes sense. Not that I buy lots of guitars, but I have some. Okay, the question from John, I think, was, what is your number one recommendation for a business book? Ooh, for someone looking into monetizing their studio. You know what? This just happens to be here. So you know Graham Cochran, Recording Revolution, right? He and I have been friends for years. We've done business together. I've kind of taken over Recording Revolution. His book's fantastic. It's called How to Get Paid for What You Know. So if you're thinking in terms of building a business kind of like Home Studio Corner, Recording Revolution, that would be a good one. If you're talking in terms of just like getting clients, this would probably still be interesting, but it might not speak to exactly what you're wanting to do. Pam is commenting as me. This is identity thievery, Pam. Identity theft applies to married couples too. Dang it. I'm trying to think. You on the spot, book wise. If you want just a kick in the pants, John Acuff, his book Start is just a really good. Just as the name suggests, Start. He actually lives in my neighborhood, which is fun, and I've yet to meet him because I'm a chicken. What else business wise? As far as practical, email me, John. I'll have to go back through my. Hang on. Let me look through my. I love The Go Giver, but it's not practical. It's just a good kind of inspiring, motivational type of thing. Let's look through my Audible library. Oh, Good to Great is really good. Again, not very practical. I like the ones that are just like theoretical, but don't tell you what to do. Sorry, I'm gonna find at least one that I feel really good about. As I go through my Audible library, I can see things where I'm realizing like, oh, I went through that phase, like I talked about earlier. A lot of these are embarrassing. Yeah, I guess those would be the ones I would start you with. Gary Keller, The One Thing is pretty good. It's kind of about focusing on the one thing that like you want to do instead of like focusing on 1,000 things, which is a little bit of what we talked about tonight. There's a book called Six Figure Musician by David Hooper. He hosts the Music Business Radio show. I own it. I never finished it, but it's specifically talking about different ways to get how musicians and sell more music and things like that. It might be a little antiquated because nobody's selling music anymore. But yeah, I think those are good. Those are some ideas. So those are some ideas. Hit me up in like 2 days and I'll probably have more ideas for you. Yeah. All right. Warren Hewitt's book, Ultimate Home Studio Guide, spends quite a bit. Okay, yeah, get that one. Isn't it called like Home Studio Recording? I think I remember that because it's the same name as my recording course. So I was like, whoopsie. Warren is delightful, wonderful person, and super knowledgeable. So yeah, I would say yes to anything. Also, I don't know if it'll have anything to do with business, but what's his face? His new book. My brain is gone. The big beardy producer guy. He's got a book. Oh boy, I'm doing great. Stuart says he's setting up his DI acoustic album. Yes, Rick Rubin. Sorry, goodness gracious. Rick Rubin's book. It's on my list. I'm sure it's wonderful, but I haven't read it yet, and I doubt it talks about business much. But I bet you'll be inspired because I watched his 60 Minutes interview, and it was something else. Okay, got it. So yeah, I would recommend John. As far as business goes, I'd recommend Graham's book for sure if you're thinking about that. And also shoot me an email because I'm wanting to start doing more of that, but I probably want to do it kind of on the DL for now. But maybe we can work something out. Okay. Anything else I'm missing? One flesh. Oh boy. This has been fun, by the way. Thank y'all for hanging out. I don't even know how many people are still here, but I appreciate you and your time. It's fun to hang out and spend an evening together, even though my studio is quite warm. It's not too bad. What is a really good video on tracking drums? If you take my recording course, I have a good video on it. Home studio recording, where I go through the whole process in my studio. So that would be my favorite. But I'm sure there's good ones on the old YouTubes. This is why I come to the live streams and why I'm a Viper. Hey, love it, John. Thankful for you. Jason B, thank you. Scott said it was a most enjoyable session. Off to make some music. Love that. Love it. Yes, Rick Rubin is who I was talking about. As long as you've been recording, do you ever deal with red light syndrome? Occasionally. So the idea of like, as soon as you start recording, you just lose your ability. Yeah, like I still to this day, and it's not really because I'm nervous. I just I get to a point where the very first phrase of anything I'm recording is always garbage every time. That's how it feels. Like the first line of a song, I will spend more time punching that in than probably the rest of the song. There's something about just getting into it. It's something, I don't know, obviously it must be in my head. But yeah, I still definitely get there. But also, I think it's just one of those things like the more you do it, the more comfortable you are. Just kind of with anything, like whatever you happen to do for a living. I'm sure some people are nervous doing that, and you probably do it without even thinking, right? That's kind of the case with this. Just a familiarity that where you're just like, oh yeah, I'm going to play a guitar. I've done this 1,000 times before. I'm pretty sure I can do it again. Brad Stevens, thanks for hanging out, my friend. Oh, did Vegas win the NHL? I didn't know. Wonderful. Way to go. Shoot you an email. Is this via the contact page? Yeah, that's fine. Or you can just email me, joe@homestudiocorner.com. Look, I just gave my email out on the internet. What a bozo. I'm not exactly a home studio guy. I'm a commercial studio guy, but I still find extreme value watching people like you. Workflow is different, but your results are top shelf. Thanks, Man Network. You should also email me. Let me know what your name is, because I've recognized you from around the interwebs, but I'm trying to place like who you are in the real world. Or maybe you're like Mixer Man and you're a mystery and I'll never know. And that's okay too. But I appreciate that. Thank you. Because I kind of feel the same way, right? Music is music. Creativity is creativity. And it's so fun to see people do their thing in whatever that environment is. Do you ever record out of order on a song to try to combat that? Oh, you mean like start with yeah, sometimes, but usually I just record all the way through again if I don't like the first one, and then punch in the rest. And I find I'm always punching in that first line, no matter what I do. Didn't you write a song about It's Only in My Head? Yes, I did. It's called All in My Head. I might have forgotten to release that. I can't remember. Somebody look it up. Did I release All in My Head? I can't remember if I did. I finish these songs and I play them for the Vipers, and then I don't sometimes don't release them on the rest of the internet. That's because that's all I care. I just want you to hear it. That's all. Yes, perfectionism, Lucas. We never get rid of it entirely. And Man Network does not want to get canceled. That's fair. What? Do you think people get canceled these days? Stuart says I did release it. Well, hot dog. Good for me. Oh, that's right. Because I did. That's right. Because I did the album cover with like the person on a hill about to turn into a Wolverine or something. Good for me. I really couldn't remember. I think I'm losing it. I think I've lost it. My memory's leaving me. Very cool. All right, any other questions? It's starting to kind of trickle down. If I missed your question, go ahead and ask it again, because I don't know if I can scroll up anymore. Ooh, there's one from Gerald. Sorry. Says, I've heard somewhere that if I can't make a vocal sound good on an SM57 on a home setup, then it's not the gear that's the problem. It's my mixing and vocal techniques. I mean, them's harsh words, but I don't know that they're really wrong. Like, is the 57 the best vocal mic for every situation? No. But I mean, I got one right here. It's hard. Like this, the 57 is a $100 mic. This mic that I'm using right now is the Presonus PX1. It's a $130 mic. It's super light. It feels kind of cheap. I expected to hate it, but it actually sounds okay. It's not the best mic I've ever used. But whenever I use like a 57, I'm always surprised, especially if I use it on something other than a guitar amp, like an acoustic guitar or a vocal. It always strikes me as, oh, that sounds better than I expected it to. So in one sense, yeah. I think there's probably another problem. Recording technique, maybe the voice doesn't sound good. It could be anything. But while I wouldn't probably put it quite as harshly, I kind of agree. Only kind of agree. Tony John, thank you for hanging out, my friend, and welcome to the Viperhood. That doesn't sound right. Welcome. I got to stop talking. With the SM57, you'll need 2 pop filters. Well, yeah. If you're singing right up on the 57 and all the plosives are happening, then yeah, that's a problem. But put a pop filter. I don't have one within arm's reach, but get a pop filter if you don't have one, or do what I do. Like right now, I'm talking into the side of the mic ish, like it's here, so it's not when I go, it doesn't hit the mic. That can work too. It sounds a little different, but worst case scenario, just put the SM57 like this and sing, or move it back a little bit. But yeah, I mean, those, sure, man. Unless it's broken, it's not the mic. See, Man Network says it's straight. Michael says, my daughter sounds great with a 58 or 58 beta. Well, there you go. I'm still not entirely sure. Oh no, I just spilled coffee on my keyboard. And that's it for the night. That's not good. I'm still not entirely sure what makes the beta of those betas and the regular ones, but is it a better frequency response? I don't remember. I have a bunch of Shure windscreen pop filters that screw onto the 57. Get out of town. They screw on? Or do they just kind of slide on? Do you take the plastic part off? I think mine's kind of broken. Maybe not. Anyway, delightful. Madonna had recorded some tunes with a 58. I'm sure, right? Michael Jackson, apparently, the SM7 for at least Thriller, if not a lot more. The beta has a boost and higher response. Okay, that's what I thought. That's not what I thought. I assumed it was something along those lines. Maybe. Any other questions? Oh, there's one. Marco, talking about album covers. I miss getting actual CDs out, don't you? Well, no, I'm pretty lazy. I'm young enough that I didn't really grow up buying records. So like the whole experience of a massive record and opening it up and the huge, like that, I would miss had I done that. But and looking through the CD cover just was never that fun to me. And then you have to find them. And then you have the big CD holder thing in your car and then you lose it and now all your music's gone. That was a sad day when I lost I still don't know where it went. Pam, if you're listening, if you know where it went, you should let me know. Ricky says, question regarding buying more gear. Mistake. Is it ideal to have 2 sets of monitors, translation and full accuracy, or is headphones enough for accuracy? No, I don't think you... I've never gotten into the 2-monitor workflow. Like, currently I just have these Scepters from PreSonus. I have another pair of PreSonus speakers over here. They're just plugged into the keyboard, so I can play without having to run it through my system. I just never, whenever I do have multiple speakers, when I start switching back and forth, it just becomes a distraction because I'm less worried about how the mix sounds and more like, oh, these aren't quite level matched. And so I spend 20 minutes level matching them, and then I missed the whole point of why I had them to begin with. So no, I don't think you have to. A lot of people do and swear by them. If anything, I would be more inclined to go like 2 speakers and then like an Aratone, like crappy speaker thing. I had this idea. One day I want to release a speaker that's just called the crap speaker, and it's literally like the slogan is, it sounds terrible. And the whole idea is you just buy it to like here. I'm sure there's already lots of those out there, but no, I don't think 2 is necessary. I think headphones probably are better. Even if I had to, I'd probably switch to headphones more than I would the other speakers. Because, yeah. And headphones take the whole room out of the equation, so it's a nice extra piece of, okay, what's really happening here? Any tips on how to determine if you're ready for the jump from part-time singer, songwriter, producer to full-time? Leave my corporate job and hope to support my family. David, first of all, congratulations. That's really fun and exciting. The only rule of thumb that I have is you don't have to wait until, like I'm thinking about, like I heard this advice from Dave Ramsey a while ago, like when you're getting to a point where you're making half of what your salary is at your job and you're doing it on the side, it's probably time where you can make the jump, because all that extra time that you're getting back will go towards the other half. And that feels like pretty good advice. But also, like, I'm a dreamer. I love business, love entrepreneurship. But also, realism's a thing too, right? So if you've made like $1,000 total with this side gig, even if you're passionate and you love it, and even if you're amazing at it, if that's all you've made, I probably wouldn't quit the job yet, right? For me, when I started Home Studio Corner, didn't even plan for it to be a business or make any money. But one of the things Pam and I talk about a lot was it was probably year and a half or so. Because I started in 2009, and it was like summer of 2011 when I was finally full-time, not with no other jobs. And it took my wife a long time to kind of be okay with it. And I finally was like, hey, look at this spreadsheet and how every month for the last year and a half, I've made money. Now, some months were not much money, but look how it's been surprisingly consistent. And there's a good chance that's going to continue. It was the whole thing for her was, but it's not guaranteed. It's like, yeah, that's true. But also, like, your day job's not guaranteed, right? They could fire you tomorrow. You might get a little severance, but then you're done, right? So anyway, them's my thoughts. All right, I'm going to wrap up here. I'm going to try to get these last couple of questions, but I think my voice is going. Well, maybe y'all are done with the questions. Do you have a process for pre-production for getting it right at the source for drums or electric guitars? So like pre-production for my last EP with my band, we got together, like we were planning to track the following Saturday was going to be like tracking day, drums, bass, and whatever guitars we could do. So we got together the previous Saturday to just make sure we had the song mapped out. So really just to make sure we all had the same chart, because we had written these songs and played them, but we'd never like said, okay, exactly how many bars is this section and what are we going to there and how long is the outro, things like that. So a part of that ended up being we recorded a few little drum parts, like a drum loop part for a song that day. But that's about it. Having a core structure for the song is probably the most important thing pre-production wise. With something like that, that's a band where we're gonna all track in a room together. If it's something that I'm gonna piece together, then the pre-production and the production, the lines are blurred at that point, right? Because some of the stuff I do in pre-production might stay in the final one, things like that. I'd love to find a Fender Bassman that I could afford. Bassmans are cool, man. I don't know where you're from, Michael, but like the Nashville Craigslist is insane. I'll go home to Mississippi and look at the Craigslist for like Jackson, Mississippi for musical instruments, and there'll be 2 or 3 posts a day. Nashville's like 2 or 3 pages a day, and stuff like that comes up. Now it's usually not very cheap because everybody here knows what it's worth, but places like that, if you're within driving distance, might be worth looking at. Do you put the tissue paper over the NS10 tweeter to soften the highs? No, I don't. I don't have NS10s. Yes, Dan, those Earthworks are delightful. I got mine. It was that 3-pack drum mic kit, and I kept 2 and like traded 1 for a guitar, and it was like a great deal. I never meant to use them. I use them on overheads for drums, but it was never meant to. I just always used them for mostly acoustic instruments, and it was delightful. Gerald says, SM57 is all I can afford right now, so I'm just wondering if I need to get separate vocal mic or just get better at singing and producing. Dude, go for it. Stick with the SM57 and make it sound amazing. Yeah. Because I think that's, like Man said, unless it's broken, I think you're just keep at it. Jorge, thank you. Scott, thanks. Michael, Dan, John, Brian, thank y'all for being here. This was super fun. And okay, so just last time I'm going to say it, VIP doors are open for the next week. So 1 week from today at like midnight, the doors close for a season. So if you're thinking about it, go ahead and jump in, test out the waters. You can always cancel later if it's not your thing. But that is it for me for today. Thank you for being here, and I will see y'all around. Later.